Can you hear me, Regina?
Yes.
Very good.
Hi, Dan.
Hey there.
Hi, Regina. How are
Hi,
you?
Dan. Good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, you guys. Let's hope it's a better one, right?
Odds are good, hopefully, I think.
Hi, Dan. This is Darlene.
Hey, darling.
Did Barbara asked me to join the all hazards mitigation group or meeting or
Yep.
whatever, but I didn't get anything about it. But I see that it was passed. So did you just pass what usually happens, I guess?
The brief update on that is that, yes, there is a committee. We did not get the contract to do the all hazard mitigation work. They gave it to a national firm.
Oh,
So we will forward that information to Stephanie Smith at VEM, and she will pass it to the consultant or something like that.
oh, I see. I just wondered if maybe they included COVID on that, but
Yeah, I mean, we
So
will
sweet.
flag it. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thanks. I was just wondering.
I'm still admitting people here, so
You know,
excuse me for a second. I'll be back.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Pam. Annie Costandi, are you on there?
Hi, Charlie.
Do we have
Yeah,
one of
I'm
our?
here.
Okay, good. I don't know why I'm closing the door. So. Regina, you can see all the names there in the participant for the minutes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, we'll wait another about 1 or 2 more minutes. I guess we'll get started. Does that sound good, Annie?
Works for me.
Okay. Okay, let me see if I can do the record button. Is it automatically recording, Regina? I can't tell.
No.
It says,
Well, it
oh,
does
it
say it's
says, yeah,
recording.
it is saying
Yeah.
recording. Okay, all right, good. All right, so I'm Dan Albrecht. Annie Costandi is our co-chair. Annie, you okay if I run things here?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So I won't do a roll call. You can just click on the participants and you can see here we have our Clean Water Advisory Committee. And then we also, I did extend this invitation quite a ways around to other RPCs who are also involved with clean water service provider issues. And we may have some folks from some of our Basin 5 communities as well too. So we'll see how that goes there. And on quite a few RPC staff and DR and DEC staff as well. So just to again, our agenda for today. I won't go hopping back and forth, but so after we go through the minutes, we'll have Danielle Ozarski who will walk through the update to the basin plan number 7 for the Lamoille. go through that. Then starting around 11:30, we will discuss the Clean Water Service Provider Rule, the draft rule, and any other updates. So I guess the first question, are there any items that need to be added to the agenda? Okay. Any public item on public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, sounds good. And just for clarity, we are have our MS4 meeting starting at 12:15. So we want to keep things moving along quickly and also try to start the Clean Water Service Provider discussion right at 11:30, because that's what I told other people would start then and all. So first item there is the agenda, the minutes from October 6th. I encourage you to look them over there on the link on our webpage. Most of the meeting was on the discussion of DEC General Permit 3-9050, sometimes called the 3-acre permit. But as I'll just reiterate, this covers lots of other issues besides the 3 acres as well too. So that was most of the discussion on that. We again also had an update on the Clean Water Service Provider rule there. And that was it for the minutes of October 6th. Take a look there at the, be sure you look at the attendance or anything like that. So can we get a motion on those minutes? Oh, maybe I need to unmute people. Let's see.
Dan, this is Annie. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the October meeting.
Thank you.
Dan, this is Karen Adams. I'll second it.
Great. Thanks. All right. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of October 6th. Any corrections, deletions, changes, edits? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any negative
Aye.
votes?
Aye.
That's good. Any abstentions? All right, no abstentions. Okay, so those minutes are approved there. Our next item up will be Danielle Arozowski from DEC on the Basin, Lamoille Basin Plan. You should be
Can I
able to, yeah, you can
Yeah,
try
can
to,
I share my screen?
you should be able to, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so first I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I'm Danielle Ozarski. It looks like my face is really blown out, so hopefully you'll be able to recognize me if we ever saw each other on the street. And the purpose of today is just for me to familiarize myself or you with me, to let you know sort of the geography of where the Lamoille Basin falls in Chittenden County, and information about the planning process for this year, our timeline, where you'll be able to provide input, and then where you can look for info and contact information on who to contact. So let's see if I can get my screen to share. I think this is the one I want. Alrighty, so can everybody see what looks like a watershed, a river flowing through? Greenery, yes, all right, great. So that is the Lamoille Basin. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this spot. It's actually looking out from Prospect Rock in Johnson, Vermont. And Dan, I think, sent a link to this, and then we also have a really basic intro to tactical basin planning that folks can look at if they kind of need to refresh themselves. I know that you all are working on all sorts of different stuff. So whenever you need a refresher, that link that Dan initially sent out is really helpful to refamiliarize yourself with the tactical basin planning process. So today I'm just going to give you an update where things stand. So Dan should have also sent you a link, or I'm sure he can send you a link to this story map. And in this story map, we have the intro to basin planning that you can click on to learn more about it there. But just a basic background, the Lamoille River Basin's 706 square miles. It accounts for about 7.5% of Vermont's land area. And it flows 85 miles from Wheelock. The headwaters are Horse Pond. And it flows all the way to Milton into Lake Champlain. And it's a pretty big basin. It spans 35 towns and 6 counties. And you can see from this map here, hopefully folks can see it well, that it includes in Chittenden County, includes a little area, Colchester, a little neighborhood here, or a chunk of Milton. So like where Arrowhead Reservoir is, that includes the Lamoille Basin. And then a big chunk of Westford, so mostly the Browns River and the tributaries to Browns River. And that's the same with Essex, Jericho, and Underhill. It's all the upper and lower Browns Rivers that flows into the Lamoille in Fairfax. So really the only part of the actual Lamoille River in Chittenden County is in Milton and Colchester. So we're doing a 5-year update to the 2016 plan, and really basic reminder, the basin plans are guidebooks for improving watershed health, and they identify restoration goals and protection goals, and then they outline a list of action to achieve those goals. So really basic, that's what plans do. And they also identify partners and funding critical to implementing the actions. So if I put it in action, I say, this is the purpose of it. I'm also going to identify the partners who are going to help us make that action happen. So it could be a town, it could be the Regional Planning Commission, it could be a watershed group, it could be private landowners. It could also just be DEC. The next piece of this presentation is the tactical basin planning timeline. And the way that we're working through this right now is that public input is going to be sought pretty much from now through October, but there will be some sort of critical areas where we'll be asking for that input. So it's going to be ready for public comments. That's pretty much when the plan is in a pretty final draft, and hopefully folks have already looked at it before then. But it'll be out for public comment in October. I'll do some presentations, and then it should be completed by December 2021. So that's what we're hoping for. That's what that's what we've told the EPA we will do. So the public's welcome at any time to provide feedback on the plan and ask questions, just by contacting me or getting in touch with the Regional Planning Commission about the plan. And targeted feedback is going to be solicited by regional planning commissions in May during the preliminary draft review, and then again in October during the public comment. So May, this area here, I'll be completing an early draft of the plan. I'll be sharing that with Dan, and then he'll be looking that over. And if there's chunks of it that he wants to share with you all to get your feedback on, that's when that will happen. And then I'll incorporate that feedback in August and September, and then finalize the plan. So any of your feedback early on is really helpful to me to make sure that I have good information in my plan and that I have your review and understanding the priorities within your areas. And obviously I'll be letting you know what the priorities are in terms of water quality. And it's really great to get feedback to understand if I'm missing anything, or if there are initiatives and things that you're working on that you think would be important for me to be tracking in the plan. So another piece of the plan that's really important that we're working on is the phase 3 implementation plan, part of the plan. So that's really all about accounting for phosphorus reductions for the basin. So the way that the plan will look at that is that we'll have recommendations for phosphorus pollution reduction in all our 4 sectors. So agriculture, stormwater, which includes roads and developed lands, wastewater, and then natural resources. And that includes point and non-point source water pollution. We'll also be reporting on any reductions from the regulatory initiatives, such as the municipal roads general permit, the required ag practices, and the 3-acre general permit. So those will be responsible for a significant part of the reduction load. But then there's also what you all will be talking to Neil about later today at 11:30, as Dan said, is about the water quality councils and the clean water service providers and their role in meeting pollution reduction targets. So what I'll do in the plan is those types of projects and priority areas that aren't necessarily going to be hit by regulatory actions, those are ones we'll identify and help to identify in the basin plan so that the clean water service providers and the basin water councils know where to focus their efforts, where to get their best reductions, and we'll have strategy areas identified, but then we'll also have projects identified in the Clean Water Project Explorer and the Watershed Projects database. So those groups are going to be responsible for the non-regulatory pollution reductions across sectors. And I think the largest reductions will probably be focused on natural resource projects. And then the other thing the plan will have in it, which I think is really fun and that I like working on, is the progress that we've made since 2016. So I'm producing a report card basically that says, this is how many of the 73 projects we identified in the 2016 plan, this is how many are complete, this is how many are ongoing or in progress, and sort of these are the new projects that we want to include based on the progress we've made. And then something fun that I'm going to be sending out to folks next week is a survey. So this survey is for watershed stakeholders, so it's perfect for members of the QUAC, it's perfect for regional planning commissions, and just your neighbor as well. So this is being developed. I'm just having it reviewed right now, and I'll be sending it out to the partners to then distribute widely. And what that does is it'll ask a number of questions. I think it probably would take around 10 minutes, depending on how much information you want to provide. But it's just basically going to provide me information about where you think important areas are to focus on, where you think there are high quality waters, where you think maybe there should be monitoring. So that'll provide that information back to me in a really organized format. So I'm kind of excited to send this out, and hopefully it will be useful. And I would, of course, appreciate your feedback on the survey as well. So that's pretty much it. That's all I have to tell you today. So this is me without my face all lit up, and my contact information. Like I said, feel free to contact me, or you can talk to Dan and he can talk to me, whatever works best for you. So Dan, I don't know where we are on timeline, but if anybody has any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer.
We're doing fine on time. I guess I wanted to check in, perhaps you and I had discussed how best to address municipal concerns here, and in terms of maybe take a minute, and I don't know if you want to refer to the implementation table, but is that something you can reference in terms of, because you wanted some feedback early on about, what things might be needed to look at the old plan and see what sections need to be updated as far as municipal strategies, or can you talk a little bit more about municipal strategies?
Yeah, so in general, in the last plan, the municipal strategies were mainly focused on some regulatory stuff. So making sure that everybody's getting the MRGP going, doing the inventories. So that's one strategy that was listed in the basin for specific towns. And there were specific towns that had higher yields that were the priority towns. And so for instance, in terms of our report card, all those inventories have been completed. So at this point, it's really understanding from the towns where their priorities lie now. For the plan, we're saying, well, we want towns to work on those, the roads that are the highest priority and get those projects done. Another priority that was listed for a number of towns in Chittenden County were stormwater master plans. And so Jericho and Underhill and Westford Milton all completed stormwater master plans. So right now it's really just trying to get some of those high priority projects completed. So that's what it looks like from the strategy tables. And then in terms of understanding what the towns need to be able to complete those strategies would be helpful. And I'm not really sure, Dan, I know that I'll be sending out the report card to get updates from folks. I don't know if that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, that would be the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the plan, the report card, the way it's set up is it just has a list of those strategies. And what I do is I'll organize it by county and by town. And so then I'll send that list out to Dan and he can get updates from towns saying, I think in most cases, I've probably updated a lot of the information for the towns. So I'll really be looking for updates on things that maybe I don't have information on, that the town has easy to access information on. Most of it we pull from any of the funding organizations or organizations that fund projects, because they'll give us a list of projects that have been done in different towns. But that'll just be a list of projects. It'll describe what the projects are, and the towns can provide any updates that they have to those projects. And, importantly too, it's just hearing from the towns of, are they actually working on anything, currently? And I know that, I kind of know the towns that are at this point. And if there are any needs, or any areas where you think that are priorities that we're not highlighting in the plan, it's good to be able to know what those are and to talk to you more about them.
Okay. Sounds good. Any questions for Danielle? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thanks very much, Danielle.
Dan,
you
someone
can-
had a question.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they don't know how to unmute themselves. Andrea?
Yeah, my question was on your progress report. Is that, and I should know this, but I can't really remember, is when you're giving a list of projects that have been completed or are in the process of implementation, or even in developing it, does that report and that scorecard show what the predicted P reduction is? Is that part of the scorecard or the progress report? And is there a way of quantifying where it is currently, either with actual data or through the modeling, so that we can get a sense in these progress reports of actual data versus what was the modeled prediction of how much P reduction it would be? And what
Ooh,
it could be
yeah.
over time?
Okay. Yeah, those are really good questions. So the way that we have reported so far to the EPA, we had to do a 2.5-year report to show our progress. And we really just focused on, we've done this much percentage of projects that we've listed. And we haven't really reported necessarily on like you were saying, like on how much P reduction for those particular projects that we've done. So that's what the EPA wants us to do. And in certain places we have some of that reduction, and most of the work that we're doing in terms of the stuff that the Clean Water Initiative program is funding, they have estimates of what those reductions are based on the type of project and performance measures. So the hope is in the phase 3 part of the plan, we will be able to report on some of that reduction based on those performance measures. So it's basically the way it works, Andrea, is that is all modeled. So if you have a rain garden that was installed, when that project was funded, the engineer who did the project had to report back on a BMP reporting form, a best management practice reporting form, and say how big it was, what the water volume was treated, and how much phosphorus they think was reduced from it. And so each of those projects will be added up. And then it's also based on, the amount of time that they actually provide that reduction as well. And so that's what we'll be able to provide in the plan, is basically say for these sectors, this is the amount of reduction that we've gotten. It won't be part of the report card, but I really like that idea of being able to include that in the report card. And I think that would be the best way for us to do it moving forward. So at this point, I think that's I like that idea, and I'd like to think about it more of how we can incorporate it into our plan. But I think what we'll do now is we'll just kind of add things together and say, for stormwater, we got this much reduction. So we might not go through the different actions and how much we got. based on that. But then we also do, like you were saying, have to look at what our long-term targets are to understand where we're at in terms of meeting those targets. And I think this part of the plan, what the EPA would like us to do is to estimate in the next 5 years, this is how much we want to reduce. And so that way, the next plan that comes out will say, we said we were going to reduce this much, and this is how much we've actually reduced. So because we didn't set that target the last plan, we don't have a way to say, oh, well, we've met this % of our target. So you won't see that part in the plan. You'll just see what our targets are for the next 5 years, and then how much we've reduced at this point.
But you're basing those reductions on those practices that have been modeled, but
Yeah.
not actual data, water quality samples, or quantifying the amount of pee that's at the mouth or wherever DEC is choosing to say that we've met those standards.
Mhm.
So I think it's important for us to understand whether we're getting this reduction because of the practices that says we'll get this through modeling or through actual water quality samples and monitoring. So there has to be some way of correlating the actual results from testing
Yep.
versus the modeling. And
Yeah.
I'd like to see where that enters into this process.
Yep, that's a good point. And that's something that I think that we can address in the plan. So thanks for bringing that up. And the monitoring that's really being done now is there's some monitoring that's being done on projects. It's obviously really costly and time intensive if you were to do it on a bunch of small practices, but they are doing the large tributary monitoring to Lake Champlain. So we do have that, to look at that over time, but most of it is based on those performance measures, based on monitoring that's been done on the type of projects that they're modeling. So thank you for that.
Any further questions for Danielle?
Well, that's really exciting, Danielle, that you're ready to actually produce something that will clean up the waters. This is probably naive, but if you're in Basin 8, we're still doing the assessments and the assessments. Yeah, we're still doing assessments, right?
Right, for Basin 8, we're in the ongoing cycle. So I think that update was done a year or 2 years ago. So there's always, the assessment's always ongoing. Assessment and implementation are always ongoing. And then every 5 years, the plan is updated.
Okay. And that the Basin 8 will be updated, or the whole thing will be updated.
Yes, and I'm trying to think last year was the Basin 5, so I think the previous year was Basin 8. So that process the update process will probably be starting in 2022, I think.
Okay. All right, I guess that's my question.
Oh, and Dan,
I don't-
it's Karen.
Yeah, there she is.
The one thing to
Oh.
remember too is that every year we have the annual reports, Darlene. So we have the the clean water performance reports that are they're online, and will tell you how much phosphorus has been reduced based on the specific projects that have been completed to date. And
Okay.
that's all modeled, but it is a nice
And that's-
overview.
Okay, and that's in Basin 8.
Yeah,
report.
and they do that. The annual report is for the entire state of Vermont, but it has an appendix in the back that has the specific basins identified and phosphorus reduction calculated based on completed projects.
Okay,
And Karen, I think that comes out January 15th. That's due to the legislature, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dan, I'll send you the survey for Basin 7
Okay.
on Monday.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Danielle.
Thank
Great
you,
present-
everybody.
Okay. Before we get started here, we did have one or two folks who I can't recognize exactly where they're from. I've sent some chat messages. Who is JVH?
So that's John Van Husen.
Okay, thanks,
Oh.
John. And where you from?
Hi, Dan. I'm with Addison County Regional Planning Commission. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
came up.
Oh, that's right. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm transitioning with Kevin, so
Gotcha.
that's why I'm in your list.
Okay. All right, do. And we do have the ROGJU, that's Roger George from Swanton, joining in. So he wants to learn a little bit more about this. And then Steve Fisk, where are you from?
Hello, Steve. He's from.
There you go. You're unmuted.
he's
Identify
from Fish
yourself,
and
Steve.
Wildlife.
There we go.
I'm from the Marshfield Conservation Commission in the upper Winooski River.
All
Oh,
right.
I got a nice invite yesterday.
All right.
Damn. I
Good.
thought I'd just listen in while I pick a bug sample.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Great. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. So share screen. Where's my document? There it is. Okay, everybody should see this memo dated New Year's Eve.
damn.
I have a pretty exciting life, not much to do here on a New Year's Eve, so might as well work and stuff. So everybody should see that document here. And so just, I'm going to give a little overview of where we are in the process. Then I'm going to hand it over to Neil Kamen from DEC to talk a little bit more, focus comments on what the impacts in municipalities. And then I'm going to walk through some of the comments in the draft rule. I'm not going to walk through the whole draft rule, but I want to do. So, so if you all see that on the screen here, we've got a fairly aggressive meeting schedule and opportunity for public participation schedule. So here we are at the QUAC meeting, and we just want to kind of highlight any additional concerns that you would like the Clean Water Advisory Committee to take up in detail at the next meeting on February 2nd.
Dan,
Yep.
can you zoom in? It's pretty hard to see.
Okay.
I can't find it.
I should be sharing the screen there. It's also on our website too, if you want to just bring up your own copy. You go to the QUAC page. So it says RPC comments versus draft rule. Is that better, Regina?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, so there we are. So again, this memo I'm going to walk through highlights some of the concerns that all the RPCs, as well as VHCB, there were 5 RPCs that are designated clean water service providers, and then VHCB is doing Lake Memphremagog. So so those folks developed a set of comments here, which are pages 2 through 7 of this memo. Neil will go over the formal admittance on the formal schedule for publication. Then there are 2 online hearings. One is in the morning on February 1st, and another one on February 3rd. Okay, in the evening, and their links are there to show you how to read more about the Act 76, and I assume the Zoom links will be in there, or Teams, or whatever it's going to be. So again, kind of the goal today is to just kind of walk through quickly some of the comments, see if there's any additional concerns we want to work on. And again, I would encourage you between today and late January to look more closely at the rule. If you have questions that you want the QUAC to include in the draft letter, that draft letter would be worked on February 2nd at the QUAC meeting, and then taken to the full board meeting, our full board, who will look it over, formally adopt it, and transmit the comments. And then the deadline is February 19th for public comments from anybody, not just the RPCs, et cetera. So that's where we are with the schedule. Any quick questions about the schedule before I turn it over to Neil to give us the broader implications of Act 76 for municipalities. Not so much in the weeds on things here, but those implications. Any questions on the schedule? Okay. So Neil, I'm going to keep the screen up, but go ahead and yeah, you got the floor here.
So good morning, everybody. Actually, Dan, if it's okay, I'd like to share a window on my screen. Do you mind?
Yeah, sure. I'll stop my share.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if I can do it. Zoom, Teams, you know how it goes. There we go. All right. And if somebody could please just let me know when
Looks good.
you can see that. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Nice to see some friendly faces, or Steve, in your case, a half face. Good to see that you're in the lab and doing your thing, my good man. I essentially agreed. Dan asked me if I could kind of be part of the meeting just to answer some questions that you might have on the rule. I hadn't necessarily overview of Act 76, but I can essentially do that pretty easily. So I will do it very briefly in 3 slides for you, trying to focus on sort of the municipal side of the equation. Really, I think my best role here would be if you all have questions about the structure of the rule or what this is trying to achieve. I'll be very happy to provide some input on that. Before I talk a little bit about the Act 76 Clean Water Service Delivery Act in general, I just do want to point out that the rule that you have in front of you, while you may be seeing it in its initial stages and you may have seen one prior draft of it, the folks that you are working with, Dan, Charlie, other executive directors of RPCs and other folks, have been working with us for well over a year on the development of this. It's a pretty complex undertaking. And we really appreciate the work that the RPCs have engaged along with other stakeholders, a wide group of stakeholders, to get where we are now. The document that you see should be considered a consensus document. And as you discuss some of the RPC specific comments that were made and how the state determined to adjudicate those comments, do understand that we were receiving comments not only from this body, but also stakeholders throughout the state of a wide variety of perspectives. So that's the role of the state agency, is to try and slice right through the middle and hit the needle side. So with that, I'm just gonna give you 3 slides on the Clean Water Service Delivery Act as foundation. So this act was passed in 2019. It was rather a big deal. It was passed in order, the principal function of it was to create the long-term funding source for the Clean Water Fund, something that had been in play since 2015 in the passage of Act 64, the Vermont Clean Water Act. So Act 76 did create that long-term funding source, putting together 3 different revenue streams, including a proportion of rooms and meals tax, a proportion of the property transfer tax surcharge, and also the forfeit nickels that are left in the system when bottles are not returned. Those 3 sources comprise about what we estimate to be a $20 million revenue stream into the Clean Water Fund on any given year, and a stream that would grow over time, because those revenue sources, particularly the transfer tax and the rooms and meals tax, are predicted to grow over time. Obviously, the COVID pandemic had some impacts to our revenues over the past 2 years here. We expect that to continue for 1 more, but certainly would expect to see economic activity resume. In any case, so long-term funding source for the Clean Water Fund. Second is that Act 76 prioritizes spending those dollars on non-regulatory projects for clean water. And a non-regulatory project is one that is essentially not required under one of the state permits, the 3-acre general permit or the municipal roads general permit or the MS4, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit program. And the reason for this is because the state has the ability to work with stakeholders over time to make sure that the permit programs get implemented. However, we don't have the ability to compel all of the additional projects that are on the non-regulatory side of the ledger to be done. And so, for example, there's no mechanism for the state to compel the restoration of a floodplain or the installation of a river buffer or something like that. And so by setting the stage to prioritize those investments first through the Clean Water Service Delivery Act, we're making sure that we can meet our goals. So prioritize non-regulatory project funding with the Clean Water Fund. Recognize that there are other funds that are available to support some of the other permit programs. So capital funds and or basin program federal funds or other state revolving loan funds are also available, not subject to that regulatory / non-regulatory constraint. Also, the Act prioritizes that we spend dollars on operation and maintenance for the reasonable operation and maintenance of projects, non-regulatory projects that we put on the ground, which makes a lot of sense because if a project is not properly maintained, it does not deliver the nutrient and sediment reduction that you expect over time. And lastly, and this is why we're here today and why we're talking about a rule, is the Act creates the concept of a decentralized network of clean water service providers throughout Vermont, starting with the Lake Champlain and Memphremagog basins, to help the state direct the non-regulatory funding to build the projects necessary to meet our goals. And so the way that works is the Act compels the state to create a set of rules that establish clean water service providers, name them and identify them by each watershed planning basin, and then establish rules of the road for how those clean water service providers operate. And for those who might be familiar with Agency of Human Services designated agency model, this is a similar approach to that, where human and mental health services are provided by the state through designated regionalized entities. And so clean water services will be provided through the state by decentralized clean water service providers. As Dan noted, the 6 Lake Champlain basins are being served by 5 of the regional planning commissions, in one instance in coordination with the Natural Resources Conservation District. And Memphremagog will be served by the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And so I just want to go down one more slide here, 2 more slides, and just briefly talk a little bit about the structure of the service providers and how the governance is going to work, because that's kind of important. And some folks that are on this call will be involved in the governance, and some folks on this call may rather be involved in guiding the governance structure that is created. So Dan, let me know if you can see the cursor on my screen.
Yep, can see it.
Nodding. Okay, thank you, Steve. I see you nodding. Perfect. So in this, I'm showing 2 examples here. In this example, you've got the Lamoille River Basin number 7 right here, which is serviced by a clean water service provider. In this case, it's Northwest Regional Planning Commission. And that service provider has with it essentially a board of directors, a Basin Water Quality Council. The role of the service provider is to identify, design, and build the water quality projects using a formula allocation of funds that the state provides to the service provider. And the role of the Basin Council is to make decisions for the service provider for what the most important impairment areas are within their watershed in consultation with the Basin Plan, and which are the projects that are the most important in order to achieve the water quality goals. And the water quality goals are established based on the formula grant that the state provides to the service provider. So there is this governance structure that's created to support the clean water service providers, and that structure is supported by the organizations that really do this work and have their eyes and ears on the ground. So Natural Resources Conservation Districts have 2 seats on a Basin Council. Regional Planning Commissions have 2 seats on a Basin Council. Watershed organizations have 2 seats. Municipalities have 2 seats. And local and or statewide conservation organizations interested in land management conservation have 1 seat. So a 9-member board working in tandem with the clean water service provider. And then the watershed planners, so Danielle and Karen are on the line, but in other basins, other watershed planners serve this role, will serve as the liaison between the state and the service provider. And the state will take a much more hands-off role than the state had been doing prior to block grants or even now with block grants. I'll just also point out there's an alternate model here. And when we created this map, we should have just flipped this around. There's nothing to say that a service provider can't service more than one basin. And if they do, you would have one service provider providing services in this exemplar to South Lake and Otter Creek, although this isn't reality, this is an exemplar. But they would have 2 basin councils to work with, 1 basin council for each watershed. The reality is that Northwest RPC is proposed as a service provider in the draft rule for the Missisquoi and the Lamoille basins. And so they will set up 2 basin councils, but they will and administer 2 formula grants, but they will be the one entity doing that. There's an economy of scale there. And so, as I noted, the boards of directors will help the service providers direct the formula grants to the highest priority projects that net the greatest nutrient gain based on the modeling and the targets that Danielle and Karen already spoke about on the call earlier. And so I also want to speak a little bit about the funding for this. So Act 76 also creates some new funding prioritizations, and this is where the municipal hook comes in. And so folks should, from the municipal perspective, should listen in on this. I'll just go to the next slide. The Act establishes 3 tiers of priority for the Clean Water Board to propose the use of the Clean Water Fund in any given year. And in the first tier of priority are 3 baskets of money. The first is projects for funding for non-regulatory projects to go to clean water service providers. Firstly, for reasonable operation and maintenance of what they've already built. Secondly, for water quality restoration formula grants to achieve the targets that are assigned. And thirdly, to support administrative costs not more than 15% of the total formula and O&M award. And in addition to this, there is at the highest tier, $500,000 to support tactical basin planning and Basin Water Quality Council participation in tactical basin planning that is in addition to the formula funds. And so that's nice because it allows for 2 separate funding mechanisms to make sure that folks who are participating on basin councils are appropriately compensated for that work and have the bandwidth, therefore, to assist the service providers in identifying the best projects, working with the basin planners, and to get those stood up. Also in this top tier is the requirement that the Clean Water Board also establish a non-regulatory funding source for water quality enhancement and protection. So this is for projects that go above and beyond restoring water quality, but rather are ones to keep surface waters from going on the impaired waters list, and would be up to 25% of the Clean Water Fund, but not to exceed $5 million in any given year. And so these dollars complement the formula dollars by being available to folks that might want to do clean water projects that aren't necessarily going to be ones that are going to achieve the best phosphorus gain, but are great natural resource restoration projects. And most certainly for projects outside of the clean water service provider territories. So the Connecticut River Basin and the Hoosick-Walloomsac, for example. And we'll have to be careful, and from the state's perspective, of making sure that we differentiate what types of activities are eligible in formula grants versus enhancement grants. Dan, were you looking to break in? I noticed that you're...
Yeah, just a quick question. Could a QISP, Clean Water Service Provider, administer an enhancement grant for something within a QISP region?
Yeah.
That is an example of, it's not a restorative proposal, it's protective or enhancing, but it's within a QISP region.
Insofar as the, I think the way that would work is the QISP's host entity, for example, the RPC, might apply for a protection type activity that might actually complement a formula-based activity to assemble a package of funding.
Gotcha. Okay.
Really valuable in that space between conservation and straight restoration. So these enhancement and protection dollars may be really great for the types of projects where you're trying to acquire and conserve land, but also put some water quality fixes on it. So you could get kind of a partnership and package deal there. We're gonna, just a quick aside on that is I intend early this year to do a little stakeholder outreach around the Enhancement and Protection Program grants, along with Emily Bird and the Clean Water Initiative Program, because there's a wide variety of perspective on what the enhancement and protection grants could and should be, and the language in the statute is a little vague around that. So, and then lastly, in tier 1 is funding levels as recommended by the board to be appropriated to Agency of Agriculture to carry out the agricultural water quality management programs. One key thing here is that in order to keep relatively clear swim lanes, the rule tries to draw a distinction between implementation in the agricultural sector and outside of the agricultural sector, with primacy for planning this agricultural specific work resting with the Agency of Agriculture, and primacy for the non-agricultural work resting with the service providers and ANR. It doesn't mean that service providers won't get into the agricultural game, and in particular for natural resources type projects, but it's not likely that a service provider would be, for example, pursuing cover cropping on farms or pursuing farm BMPs. The reason for that is there is already a pretty well-oiled machine that's out there that's doing that. And then the second tier are funds to support municipal stormwater implementation. So this would be in the category of MS4, Municipal General Roads Permit, or other municipal requirements. And in the third tier is competitive funds for private entities to essentially comply with the 3-acre general permit program. The Act establishes that third category as grants or financing. And bearing in mind that Act 76 directs this prioritization for the Clean Water Fund and the funds that the Clean Water Board oversees, the state may actually be working with other funding mechanisms to create the 3-acre stormwater financing mechanism. So long and short, we will try and create separation between the Clean Water Fund and the 3-acre permit financing program. And that's a work in progress right now and a different topic. The way municipalities can engage in this is obviously municipalities are already engaging with RPCs, conservation districts, and Watershed United in the implementation of the block grants. And so any non-regulatory project that a municipality may be interested in pursuing would do that through the Clean Water Service Provider Network and through the RPCs in the Champlain Basin, and would be fair game, the prioritization based on the nutrient value of the project and other co-benefits as determined by the Basin Council.
Hey, Neil, got a question from Pam DeAndrea from Central Vermont RPC.
Yep. Hi, Pam.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I have a question. Where do schools fall within this for stormwater treatment?
Schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's been a question I'm getting from my school district here.
That's very fair. If schools fall within 3 worlds, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. If it's non-regulatory stormwater, not required by 3-acre permit, and they're not redeveloping the school and required to obtain operational permit coverage or expansion coverage under the regular programs, if it's truly non-regulatory, that would be service provider eligible. If they are doing an expansion or they have to comply with their regular old permit that they already have, that's on the school. And if they're trying to comply with the 3-acre permit, so the many schools that fall in the 3-acre permit program, we are establishing a standalone Green Schools Initiative program specifically for them. We've got a fairly healthy body of Lake Champlain Basin program dollars available to us to do that work. Senator Leahy has been a great champion of this. We will be putting RFPs on the street imminently for that work, as a matter of fact.
Great,
Neil.
thank you. I had to throw that out. It was mostly for the 3 acre schools.
That's
so,
fine, but yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that update. Thank you.
Neil, I got a quick question here, just to same one I put in my email to you earlier, but so I just want to be clear about something. So the new funding, what the bread and butter of, actually that tier chart helps if you can keep that up.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that.
So July 2022 is when the funding will start to flow for actual projects decided, or prioritized, and ranked and selected for funding by the Basin Water Quality Council in conjunction with the clean water service providers. That money starts July 2022. Currently, municipalities access a couple different grant sources. One is the design implementation block grants. 2 years ago, they were called clean water block grants.
Yep.
Now they're called design implementation block grants. Those flow through Southern Windsor County RPC. And then there are similar funding that goes through Watersheds United and similar funding for the consortium of the natural resource conservation districts.
Right.
So that's so that funding. Then there's also the grants and aid program, which municipalities around the state it's great money, it's easy to administer, and there's towns all over the state, hundreds literally of towns doing those projects. And then, right, and so in addition to MRGP related work, we've even got MS4 towns that can access some of these grants at a 50-50 match, et cetera.
Yep.
So the $64,000 question for me as a person who works mostly in municipalities is, starting in July 2022, when do design implementation block grants go away? Does grants and aid money go away? That's the first question. And the corollary question is, when would the tier 2 grants start?
Yeah. Okay. So the current grant programs are not likely to end before the new grant programs start.
Right.
I'll go into a little bit of a detail afterwards, but I will say that the tier 2, the municipal stormwater implementation grants, are going to be the world of the MS4 and the world of the municipal 3 acre requirement for that limited number of sites that municipalities have that are not school-based sites that are 3 acre for the MRGP. So the act requires that we essentially, create these new grant programs, but we're not going to throw all the baby out with the bathwater. And we'll probably retain some of the mechanisms that we use presently in order to do that. And I'm not sure what those are going to be. That is the realm of Emily Bird's work to be, structuring that. And frankly, given the fact that we have the pandemic, and that we had, as a result, 4 Clean Water Fund and Clean Water Board processes occur in the last 8 months. She's been tied up with that, and we're a little delayed on creating these new grant categories. But as I said, we want to do some outreach around that, right? That is why the go live date of the formula grants was extended by 1 year, just in recognition that, things went haywire. We have uncertainty in the funding and the revenues. So, but the one, we won't just shut off the funds and then start some other funds later. So there'll be some crossover there. MRGP is incredibly successful. And it is, it's being administered now through VTrans as opposed to through ANR. We'll continue to do so. That'll be the allocation of funds that the Clean Water Board looks at when they allocate to tier 2. And here is the rabbit hole to a degree that I'm going to go down a little bit, which is that that asterisk in this chart suggests that we're only going to fund tiers 2 and 3 when adequate annual progress is being made to the service provider work in tier 1. And so that is exactly what the act says. One way of looking at that is that unless a 5-year cycle has elapsed and all the formula grants have resulted in 100% of the targets being achieved, tier 2 and tier 3 won't be available. I think from a fairness and political perspective, that's not necessarily the way to look at it. But we have always noted that there is a need for continued capital funding to complement clean water funds. And so that is where we likely be looking for some of these additional, the tier 2 and to a degree tier 3 funding, so that we don't just shut those programs down. I don't really want municipalities to think they're getting completely cut off and the only action will be in the non-regulatory, because I don't think that's what the legislature intended.
Great. Okay. I think that answered it. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to be mindful of time here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm good till about 12:20. So
Okay. And we need to wrap up here in 15 minutes.
I see Steve is waving his hand around. I don't know if you see that or not.
Oh, I cannot see waving. I only see raise your hand. Go ahead, Steve, if you have a question.
Yeah, getting back to the water quality enhancement protection grants, do you see some sort of maybe a riparian zone easement, conservation easement for small landowners through conservation commissions or Friends of the Winooski or even the select board as a possible way to use those funds or protect small streams? Maybe those that have been really identified or lands that have been identified as having a high connection to a stream. So a conservation easement,
Yeah.
especially for small landowners that don't necessarily, fit into the broader forestry conservation or ag conservation type easements.
Thanks, Steve. That's a great question and really on point to several people that I saw on the call earlier. So there will be two areas where funding can go to easements. Funding can go to easements under the formula grants. If it's a good project, you got a great easement where you have actively adjusting reach, and the math under the functional floodplain initiative suggests that the restoration of that is going to have a really good nutrient benefit. And I mean, the co-benefits are going to be huge for projects like that. So there's an incentive for service providers to assist in standing those up. Likewise, the funding for that outside the service provider territories would clearly be within the Enhancement and Protection Grant Program. So, one of the really exciting pieces of analytical work is that functioning floodplain initiative. And Dan, I don't know whether you've shared or you've had an opportunity to educate the QUAC about that work, but that is really seminal, groundbreaking, advanced work looking to identify the nutrient, sediment, flood reduction, cost avoidance, benefits, all wrapped up at once around if you did a particular easement right here and be able to model that value. So those are definitely projects that will be supported. And it looks like you stole the share back. So Dan, that's fine.
Pull the share back here because I was trying to make sure we cover
Yep.
this. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Neil.
My pleasure.
So I just want to skim through this document here. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I wanted to highlight some of the issues that are still unresolved. So as I noted here at the top of the memo, by and large, the draft rule, again, we were heavily involved as well as many other stakeholders in providing feedback as the draft rule was developed. I want to thank Neil, Charlie, and I want to thank him for being part of that process. It allowed for it wasn't built in a black box. So just have a side-by-side of our comments, and by our comments, I mean CCRPC and the other clean water service providers on it. So again, what I've done on the right-hand side is to show, yes, here's the actual language in the draft, and it addressed some of our concerns, which were identified in yellow in the formal letter we submitted back at the end of October. And again, the idea of being access and participation in the database will make it very easy for clean water service providers to do the work of identifying and prioritizing and working with the Water Quality Council to track projects. The procurement language is by and large acceptable. There's some trigger levels that are a little different than we have as RPCs, but it's still doable. And again, a key point about a lot of our testimony was, or our proposal, I should say, was the idea of pre-qualifying people. we at Chittenden County RPC, we have pre-qualified transportation people, Brownsfields people, water quality people, public participation people, and it just makes it easier to assign the project. So we're hopeful that us as clean water service providers is we do a big RFQ process for all the organizations, engineers, things like that. They're all set to go. Then we just can assign them a task order when a project actually gets going. So that'll make it easy to, the main thing that will be put out to bid would be the actual moving of dirt, or can you provide 1,000 trees delivered to this location or something like that. So the key thing here also is wrapping everything up in the cost. The cost of a project includes all its administrative costs and all. So we've got admin, development, design, construction. So everything needs to be a part of that. We still like to see some more clear definition that the basin planning is incorporated here in an implementation plan as part of the basin plan. That was our recommendation. So that's a question we're still going to bring up there. And maybe just an oversight, but the standard cost per unit, there's a standard annual maintenance cost as well too. So we just want to be sure that is addressed. The little slightly different language here on it's somewhat semantics. The role of the Water Quality Council and the Clean Water Service Provider is clearly laid out in statute, and it is this sort of a little bit, say, of a give and take relationship. Again, the Water Quality Councils, they primarily identify and prioritize projects. That's very clear. And also that this lays out a lot of our concerns were adequately addressed about the input of data, how projects are identified, that there's a project ranking schedule. So there's really good language in there. You can see that some of our recommendations were put in very clearly on that. So we anticipated similar to our annual planning work program at the RPC of a suite, a package of projects that, the state's going to give a budget to each basin based upon the standard cost per unit and the impairments and the targets that need to be met. And so each year, the clean water service providers in each of the regions, not just Chittenden County RPC with Basin 5, we want clean water. We have the Lamoille Basin that's going to be taken care of by Northwest RPC and Amanda Holland and Catherine Dimitrik up there, and then Winooski Basin that's going to be managed by Central Vermont RPC. We got Pam DeAndre on the call here and her boss Bonnie Waninger there. So that's the process on that. Just to be clear that you may have heard things about, there's a rule and then there's guidance. This is the draft rule. The next document, the associated document, is the guidance document, which will elaborate on further details of how the water quality councils and the clean water service providers will operate. So we just want to see the member terms clarified in that. Meetings and actions, it's all good there in terms of these are public bodies, so we'll be able to take care of that in terms of public notice of meetings, keeping minutes, posting them to the web, etc. And all. There's still a sticky wicket on the issue of the conflict of interest. There's the state attorneys, I won't name names, very, very strong language there. I've highlighted in red on the middle of page 6 that if there's a conflict, you shall recuse. And we and others tried to say, hey, let's figure out a workaround around this and all. But so, and part of the concern is a purely practical one, which is that if projects are voted on as a package, and that package would likely include projects from the watersheds groups, from watershed groups, and would include people from the NRCDs and maybe even a municipality or two. If their project is in that package that's getting voted on, they would have to recuse themselves. So could lead to lots of meetings where the major decision they make, which projects to fund, there's a bunch of abstentions. So it's still a concern. I'm not sure what the workaround is, but that's it. So that's sort of an overview of our some of the comments there. And we got a few minutes here left. If anybody here who's had a chance to look this over or has some questions for the Clean Water Advisory Committee to think about for its next meeting, again, email them to me or give me a call. But if there's something anybody wants to flag right now after they've read the draft rule.
Andrea's physical hand is up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, this is kind of a question maybe both for Neil and for Dan. Is the one thing that you didn't touch on that much in your presentation, Neil, which I found really helpful, was that accountability. That there's the clean water service providers are supposed to be enforcers as well, or to demonstrate what is the definition of accountability? So if there's money going for operations and maintenance, what happens when a project fails, or what's the definition of enforcing or accountability or, performance of a particular practice that's been put in place?
Okay. Dan, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, just be mindful of time. Go ahead.
Okay, so thanks, Andrea. That's a really good question, and it unpacks in multiple directions. But firstly, you asked a key question in there: what happens if a project fails, right? So the rule envisions that and actually has what we are colloquially calling the ladder of risk. And depending on the nature of the failure and the reason of the failure, different manners of redress. So that it isn't necessarily, if a project fails, it isn't necessarily that the service provider is just on the hook and that's it, and they have to rebuild it, that there's a mechanism to fund that. We understand that projects may fail due to acts of God and or other purposes, or they may fail because of wanton negligence or unintentional negligence, or somebody driving a truck into the rain garden by accident. In terms of ultimate accountability, service providers are not enforcers. They are not vested with the ability to enforce this rule. That ability to enforce the rule sits with the agency. But the accountability that's built into Act 76 essentially says that, if a service provider is not fulfilling their annual and 5-year annual progress, that there's the ability to put the service provider on sort of a remediation plan and or ultimately to transfer to a different service provider. I don't like to think about this in the context of failure and of enforcement and of the service providers not, making good, because everybody is approaching this from the perspective of, we are building something brand new and are approaching this with the highest of intentions and highest of intentional desire to do good here. So, obviously the rule is replete with opportunities to keep an eye on, nefarious activities or fraud. We have all of that stuff guarded against within the rule. But in terms of meeting the annual progress, frankly, this act was not going to get enacted if there were severe penalty provisions for somebody, literally putting their hand up for an altruistic activity to quote unquote make 15% to do all this work on behalf of the citizens of the state and then get hit from behind because something happened.
Right. Thanks, Neil. I got time for one last quick question, then I got to pivot to another meeting here at CCRPC. So.
Oh, okay.
Anybody got a last one? Okay. Thanks very much. For those of you in the Basin 5 area, expect voluminous emails from me over the coming weeks and we will have a draft comment letter discussed at our next Clean Water Advisory Committee meeting. So if you, again, digest the rule, think about it, if there's things, whether you're a potential, and again, just to be clear, when we wrote the proposal as to be the clean water service provider for Basin 5, we don't really intend on doing lots of projects. I'm a paper pusher. I'm not very good at planting trees or restoring natural resources. So, but I know how to manage a grant, as do all the other RPCs and VHCD and stuff like that. So we envision, again, working with the partner organizations, the conservation districts, Lewis Creek Association, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, watershed groups, citizens groups, or municipalities got a little project that's purely voluntary. Again, you're the ones who actually, the area, you will do the projects. So look at that language. Is there anything in there that's going to make it clunky for you guys to do the work? So, all right. I'm going to end the meeting here. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much,
you.
Neil.
See you to all.
See you guys.